So you've killed Strahd, but what now? If you want your Curse of Strahd campaign to last a little bit longer, if you want more Game of Thrones in your Curse of Strahd, let me introduce you to the Crimson Court, a coterie of 7 greater vampires who rule a dread-filled realm. My name is Ben Byrne, and this is how to run 7 Strahds in your 5e campaign. The sun never rises in the land called Ostoya. Therefore, the Crimson Court have seized rulership, and their influence bleeds down through every level of society. The court itself is a council of 7 vampires who theoretically rule as equals, yet they are far from allies. None of them achieved a seat on the court by being kind sovereigns. Each vampire has performed atrocities and treacherous deeds to attain their position, and none of them clawed their way to the top to become servants to each other. What's great about the Crimson Court is that it introduces Game of Thrones or Shogun into your gothic horror D&D campaign. The court is an intricate web of political intrigue. There are alliances and conflicts to navigate between each of the court members. Your party could become allies or enemies of any one of them, and your character's allegiances might shift depending on the political situation or your personal goals, or maybe what each court member can offer you. But it's not in the Crimson Court's interest to devolve into all-out anarchy and war, because the vampires need each other to maintain their bloody grip on Ostoya. There are cities that resist the Crimson Court's rulership, like Castelor and Malkovia in the north. Many valiant heroes who would give this video a like and fight the Crimson Court's influence would hail from these places. Ostoya is also caught precariously between foreign powers who wish to plunder its land or subjugate its people. The Valican clans sail from the frozen north to raid and steal resources. From the west, the Burak Empire desires to conquer and dominate Ostoyan lands. And from the south, the religious zealots of Castanella try to spread their violent fundamentalism. The vampiric strength of the Crimson Court is what keeps these outside forces at bay, and destroying the court leaves Ostoya vulnerable to invasion. If you've made it through all the exposition, these elements combined set the stage for a gothic horror D&D campaign with nuanced political intrigue, where your party must find the line between being saviors and villains. In Curse of Strahd, victory is achieved when one vampire lord is destroyed. But what are the consequences for slaying a member of the Crimson Court? The Crimson Court could be adapted to be the villains of any gothic horror setting. Your party plays the role of heroes intent on the court's destruction. If your campaign begins in Tier 1, your early interactions with the court are likely to be indirect. They're a ruling body above the aldermen of the villages that you're saving. But the court's influence will be felt from the very beginning. Commoners are forced to give up their loved ones to the blood tax which vampires have enforced. Settlements are drained of their resources and defenses if they don't pay tribute to the court. Monsters prowl unchecked in the endless night, killing indiscriminately. Such injustice will inevitably bring your characters into conflict with the court. But there isn't just one Strahd whose castle you can march on up to and slay the occupant within. If one vampire from the Crimson Court is slain, captured, or deposed, another is ready to take their place, claim their lands, and seek revenge. Or one of the deposed vampire's fledglings may rise to claim their seat at court. In fact, the party may even use the help of a vampire spawn to overthrow their sire. The key, if you're the GM, is to ensure that the Crimson Court isn't a static checklist of brooding villains waiting to be executed one after the other. The court reacts when it detects a threat to itself. They have many agents who spy for them, monsters who kill for them, and mortals who are loyal to them. If common folk ultimately feel safer with the Crimson Court ruling over them, how will you untether the court's power from the fabric of society? Where will you start the revolution? Perhaps your campaign begins in a city like Fallowheart, where the Crimson Court rules, But there is much dissent in the city streets. You begin helping the locals by slaying monsters, solving murders, stopping crimes, small quests like that. But slowly you build support against the ruling count in Fallowheart and are eventually ready to declare open rebellion. You fight your way into Fallowheart's keep and slay the count. But this isn't the end of the story, because now you have provoked the attention of the rest of the court, as 6 greater vampires descend upon Fallowheart to claim it for themselves. Can you hold them all at bay? Did you rescue the city or doom it to an even worse fate? It's entirely possible that you instead play a campaign where the Crimson Court are your allies. Gothic horror often intentionally blurs the lines between heroes and villains. Perhaps you believe that Ostoya is indeed safer under the court's protection and stewardship, or you may align with a particular court member's agenda. A countess may have many loyal humanoid subjects who she treats with kindness. A rival baron seizes one of the countess's villages, allowing his kindred to feed upon the locals. You are dispatched to rescue the village from the Baron's vampire clan, but you must do so discreetly without implicating the Countess. Seizing the village was a chess move by the Baron. He is trying to turn the rest of the court against the Countess by proving she favors humanoid lives over vampires. This accusation is likely false, that your party gets to enjoy navigating the web of loyalties and hostilities between the different court members, all whilst trying to further your own agenda, whether that's heroic or not. You might swap alliances from the Countess to the Baron if he promises to leave the village in safety and he offers you something further. Perhaps you wish to ascend as members of the Crimson Court yourself. Embrace your inner vampire using Grimhollow's transformation rules. Play as a coterie of gothic monsters attempting to seize power over the Crimson Court. Create alliances, topple your enemies, and then remove your loose ends. There's enough variation in the options for a vampire transformation, and they'll synergize differently with your class features, that you could probably all play vampires, or at least a couple of you could. One of you might prefer to transform into a werewolf instead and act as your clan's enforcer, or one of you a necromancer striving for lichdom. Defend yourself against monster hunters and mortals. An early quest could be uncovering a vampire hunter conspiracy to assassinate a court member. By bringing these assassins to justice, you win the gratitude of the local baron or viscount. Will they keep your loyalty, or will you try to replace them? Look, despite this video's title, your Crimson Court shouldn't actually consist of 7 Strahds. Every member should be a unique flavor of vampire that your party has to contend with. There are 7 canonical Crimson Court members that we listed in Citadel of the Unseen Sun, but we've mentioned other court members elsewhere as well. The truth is that you should feel free to construct your Crimson Court from vampiric characters that you find interesting. Court membership is constantly shifting as they assassinate or depose each other. Point in case, Countess Petrovskaya was living in exile in Unseen Suns episode 4, and then her position is already usurped by the Marchioness Yulia Kotov by episode 5. Here are some Crimson Court members that you could feature in your campaign, just so we can highlight how to create an interesting and varied gallery of villains. The Grand Duke Drago Koshevek is head of the Crimson Court. He is brooding, humorless, and cruel to those who rouse his anger. The Grand Duke is a strategic and manipulative mind, but much of his power is in fear. Those he can't intimidate to his will, he simply destroys. Koshevek plays no games where he does not have to. Direct, firm, imposing. He is the incarnation of death and the most powerful of the Crimson Court. The Grand Duke should be the final villain at the climax of a Crimson Court campaign, whether your party is overthrowing the court or seizing its power for themselves. I'd use the CR19 Ancient Vampire stat block from Grimhollow's Monster Grimoire for Koshevek. It hits harder, it regenerates faster, and it has more starting health. The Ancient Vampire stat block also doesn't suffer many vampire weaknesses. Koshevek is simply too too ancient to be harmed by sunlight or running water. I'd also be tempted to give him a handful of spells: Flaming Sphere, Spirit Shroud, or Finger of Death. He can command the dead to rise with a single gesture. I wouldn't even make that a spell. An encounter with Koshevek should feel like Cypher, Trevor, and Alucard's battle with Dracula. Desperate, violent, and by the end of the campaign, personal. Of course, the Grand Duke should rarely need to fight himself. The Chiropteran Behemoth is a CR20 vampiric bat dragon created by Koshevek. Any character that wishes to challenge the Grand Duke will need to contend with the Behemoth's psychic shriek and blood-draining bite first. Baron Mikhail the Wolf is towering and ragged. Unlike most of his contemporaries, Mikhail cannot hide that he is a monster. His hands are claws, his eyes are amber. The Baron is a unique member of the Crimson Court in that he isn't strictly a vampire. He is instead a Phazeg, a horrific hybrid cursed with both vampirism and lycanthropy. The Phazeg is a dangerous stat block in the Monster Grimoire, with vampire-like features like regeneration and a bite attack which can actually stun those that it hits. But the Phazeg has no vampiric weaknesses like forbiddance or sunlight sensitivity. It can also conjure wolves as allies in battle and order them to attack using their reaction. A Phazeglac is a weaker Phazeg stat block, similar to how a vampire spawn is a weaker vampire. Many of these creatures would accompany the Baron as he roams Ostoya, going wherever he is needed. Yet despite his wolvish, bestial appearance and appetite, Baron Mikhail is in fact more tempered and approachable than Drago Koshevek. The Baron realizes more than his fellow vampires that the Crimson Court is only as strong as their united pack, and therefore he tends to be less prideful or stubborn. Nevertheless, the Baron's capacity for violence is legendary, and he is often used as the sledgehammer of the Crimson Court. Many commoners fear him more than any other court member. Count Maximilian Varlov is a sniveling court member who clings to the scraps of power he is thrown. He is sent to Fallowheart to establish the Crimson Court's rule over the city. However, Fallowheart is a poisoned gift. The rest of the court expects Varlov to fail at pacifying dissent and will use this as a pretense to destroy him. Varlov is a twisted, unpleasant, Nosferatu-like creature. Red spittle escapes his lips when he speaks. His beady, bloodshot eyes glare with greed and hunger. Count Varlov was created for a home campaign and intended to be the first member of the Crimson Court the party would encounter and potentially destroy. He is nasty, vain, and cruel, yet his low esteem within the court means that he is able to be bargained with or manipulated if he sees opportunity to strengthen his position. Nevertheless, he is dangerous. Count Varlov could be an ally to your morally grey party. He's a rung to start the climb towards power, who you can later dispose of if he doesn't betray you first. Nevertheless, Varlov is dangerous. Use the Nosferatu stat block from Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft for Varlov. The blood vomit ability is just so disgusting that it's perfect for a petty and vile creature. A buffed up version of the Soman vampire Sangromancer from the Monster Grimoire is also a great stat block for a Crimson Court member. I'd maybe give it a little bit more health just so that it can live up to other court members. Its ability to drain blood that then fuels its sangromancy showcases a true bloodbender who's mastered the manipulation of life's vital essence. Countess Augustine Vasaneska would be perfect for such a vampire, as she is the Crimson Court's sommelier. Her keep is a prison for those who have been taken by the blood tax. Many are bound and slowly exsanguinated over months or even years. Vasaneska's lair is a red-drenched horror house, guarded by blood oozes and the dry husks of her victims. Only the most prepared monster hunter should dare step inside Countess Vasineska's castle, in which case, you should watch this video about D&D's new monster hunter class. Or if you want more general tips and ideas to make vampires formidable adversaries, you should watch one of our most popular videos here. As a vampire craves blood, we crave likes on this video. Subscribe to join our undead horde and raise our standing in the Crimson Court.